So what's up, y'all? Let me do a little bit of intro. My name is Luis Alejandro Tapia. I am Black. I am Dominican. I was born and raised on, yes, baby, you're right. You know it as the Bronx, and as the so-called Bronx, that we also call it as land of Lenape, Lenape Hoking. And I've been in the work of change and transformation for a pretty long time. As long as I mean, the earliest memories of my work there was helping my mom support my younger siblings, right? Getting them to school and practice on time, getting us to daycare on time. Um, and so kind of like looking at change as something that is not, doesn't necessarily have to kind of like be in big ways, but really exists in deep ways. And so that brings me at least to this conversation here, right? This conversation that is being hosted by Illuminate, and we're naming it the Power, Justice, and Systems Change webinar series, supported by Lankity Chase, is really a conversation around equity, right? It's a conversation around this field that we're calling systems change that has been dominated mostly, right, by knowledge from those who hold power and those working from a position of privilege, whether it be educational, economic, or other. And so this is the field we recognize that this is the field that seeks to transform systems that oppress, harm, and perpetuate injustice and inequity in the world. And so we also recognize that it's time to move our ecosystem of practice and theory towards one prizing the principles of mutuality, equity, respect, reciprocity, and dignity. And so we know right now, especially right now, that there's a pressing need for us to build healthy and equitable connections between systems leaders from all walks of life and practice to ensure that this field, systems change field, that's dedicated to a thriving people and planet does not become distorted, redundant, or worse still, that it perpetuates the very harms that we seek to collectively tackle as a field, right? And so that's why we're here. If you're here for that, you're also in the right place. Um, Folks may know that there's a lot of energy around equity, which I mentioned, especially over the past few years, especially after the killings of George Floyd here in the United States, right? And so what this presents is a time in history for us to do the things that we say we're doing or that we're going to do. And it really is a time where traditional dominant narratives and practices are coming into question on a larger scale. And I know you can feel it. And so Illuminate, we're here to amplify the disruptions, the challenges, and questioning the very field that we're a part of, right? And so with that, I'd love to introduce Janvieve. Hey, Janvieve.
Hey, how are you?
Janvieve, wow. Okay. So I want to allow you to introduce yourself, right? And then I want to share some things that I know about you, that I felt from you, and that maybe people should know that maybe you didn't name. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So
Yeah,
please do
probably because you know that I probably forget a lot of things.
it.
Because we do. Um, so first thing, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Buenas tardes, buenas noches. I'm a daughter. Sometimes I forget that, right? I'm a daughter. And now that I'm in my parents' home, that's very present to me. That um, while I'm a grown woman, I'm also a child of both my mother and my father, and I welcome that. Right, I welcome being a child again. And I'm also a mother. Right, I'm a mother to two amazing children, an 11 and a 9-year-old, and and I navigate both those things very present, even though those roles are merging almost into one these days, and I welcome that as well. Um, and that's part of the conversation tonight, right? Like when roles kind of merge into one. And I'm the founder of an amazing organization called Afro Resistance, which is almost 20 years old. And this organization is committed to Black liberation, human rights, racial justice, gender justice, migration without borders, free movement, like all these different things to protect the lives of Black people throughout the Americas. Um, what else about me? I am I consider myself a visionary. I consider myself somebody that thinks outside the box. But what I really am is somebody that connects, right? So I'm a connector and a ghoster. I connect and I take a step back, and I'm okay with that. Um, but with that comes a whole other piece, right? Um, that sometimes I'm like, how come they didn't call me? But that's because I connect and I ghost, I connect and I ghost. And I've, as of, I would say like the past 2 years, come to really internalize and accept that and not be like, why? And I really appreciate and I really acknowledge and I really love that that's the role that I have always played. In not only in the movement but in like my friend circles and my family is connect and goes and I'm really proud of that too. um I am i'm an I'm a very introverted extrovert, and that's something that a lot of people don't relate to me, but I actually like being alone. I really enjoy it. And I love being around people. But even when I'm around people, I'm pretty alone. So you will see me at the hypest party, but it's only like for a few minutes that you'll see me really hype. So I'll be sitting by myself and I'm completely fine being by myself. And um, I love seeing people have fun. And it's not like I'm not having fun. I am having the time of my life, but alone. And eso está bien, right? And I'm not sure if I'm frozen or not because Luis is really quiet.
I think I'm frozen.
Okay. And I'm like, am I frozen when speaking? But Maricela, I saw her put a little heart up. So
Yep, you're good. You're not frozen.
okay, cool. There we go.
That was a good pose though that I frozen, no?
Yeah, I was like, that's the kind of pose that a lot of my students would put, and I'll be like, are they frozen?
So you didn't tell us about your professorship, Professor Janvieve Williams.
Correct.
You didn't tell us about your talent management of your. You were alternating with your children. Who are you? Whose agent are you this year?
Who's what?
Agent. Remember, you're like the talent agent for one of your kids, and you alternate with your partner.
Yeah, well, I don't know about talent agent, but yes, my kids are like it's just amazing, right? It's so cute. They're just really cute, and they're just amazing human beings. So my daughter is a self-declared chef, and we really like honor and respect that role that she has taken on, not only for herself but for a community, right? So she has she bakes cupcakes, she makes cookies, but she also cooks. But she's also, she's the daughter of two organizers. So in that um and I'm just gonna brag here because I'm just really proud during the pandemic, right? When in different countries throughout the region, because of the mother that she has, the kids are really well versed in a lot of issues and topics, right? So when there were demonstrations, like for example in Colombia and Brazil and all that kind of stuff, she wanted to make um, comida para la paz, right? Food for peace, right? And she knew what kids wanted, and she wanted to make it for kids. It had like like a little chicken wing and French fries, and it had like little perfect perfect little meals, and it was like in a bento box, and she really wanted to get these to Colombia. She really wanted to get this to Panama. Right? Those are just really hard to do, but just that the thought process was there. On another day, her and her little bestie, Amari Nude, they were on their scooters and they were scoping out abandoned spaces in the Bronx where they could put like a little cupcake factory. So folks out there that you want to like, invest in local economy in the Bronx for two Bronx based kids. They want a cupcake factory in the Bronx that they could just give away because they were not even looking to make money. They wanted to give away cupcakes and give away ice creams, right? My daughter even wanted to feed. She wanted to feed children ice cream because she's like, after a certain age, kids want to be fed. She's like, adults want to be fed too, and it doesn't happen after a certain age. And I was like, sure it doesn't. I would love to be fed. So it's like little things like that that is like, and now she's making DACA cookies for a university professor that is teaching about immigration and organizing, and she has a unit on DACA, right? Which is a program around documenting undocumented students specifically, right, and youths. So now she's baking cookies for around DACA. So that's my daughter. She's just amazing. And then my son, he's a writer. Check out Indie Kids, the newspaper. He has some articles on Indie Kids that he has written, and he has done a podcast as well. So shout out to Indie Kids that is cultivating the next generation of youth, children and youth writers um, that are not propagating misinformation. So shout out to them too.
Okay, shout out to you. So if you could use like a course on systems change parenting, draw
Call me.
a +1 in the chat. Put a +1 in the chat so we could take a poll, see if the interest is there, because I'm gonna be the first one to line up on that. So I want to jump on that, right? Like systemic thinking. You mentioned the way that your daughter is thinking about creating change in the world, right? And your son a writer, right? And kind of like sharing his thoughts, right, on things and doing it that way. Um, what does that look like? That's not the real question. The question is not what does that look like in your work. I guess the question is like, what does that really mean to you when you think about systems change, right? And we have this field, the systems change field. What does that mean to you? Um, how does your work engage, right? Um, or rather, yeah, like how do you engage in systemic thinking, through your work? Um, and what are you learning about systems change as you do your work? And you didn't necessarily name your work as systems change, right? You named education, you named organizing, you named parenting, you named human rights strategy. And so I want to know, how do you articulate systems change as part of your work? How do you come to it? And what does it actually mean to you?
Hmm. Hmm. For me, it's the long term, right? For me, it's the long term and the thinking, the non-linear thinking, right? So I believe that a lot of times people engage in, to do this you have to do this, to do this you have to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, right? And I don't necessarily think like that, right? And for me it's very hard. Not that it's hard to follow rules and directions. It sort of is,
For me,
but pardon me, it
so
sort of
the long
is,
one for me.
right? But I could do it, right? It sort of is, but I could do it. But I don't like doing it. That's the thing. I don't like doing it because that hasn't given us the results that we need. And that's a proven fact. It just hasn't given us the results that we need. And it just doesn't make sense, right? So for me, it's also okay. So we have different ways that we can tackle something. And people learn differently. And that's the other piece, right? People learn differently, people experience things differently. How can we meet people where they're at, where we're not on top of each other, right? Um, and that, one of my aunts at a very young age, right? And this is like going back home once again. We used to have a next door neighbor, and he used to put his music really loud, just really loud. And I used to it used to bother me a lot. And I used to be like, ah, right? And at this point, I was already organizing. And part of the issue was that his music would start really late. And I used to have to wake up really early. And my aunt was like, "Tu sabes que, Janvieve? The thing is, his rights begin where your rights end. And your rights end where his begin. So you all have to like work this out because he has the same rights that you do. So he has the same rights of silence, the same rights to enjoy, the same rights to recreation. So, you know, right? And we're both black. It was a black building. We lived in a black building. And, there was no calling cops or anything like that. Like that wasn't like even a thing. That wasn't even like, you don't even do that here. So I really had to sit with that, like around like,
Wait, I need a pause. I love that. I love that dream for where I am. That I could just be like, yeah, we don't even do that here. Like that's not even a thing we do.
that's not
Yeah,
even the
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
not even a thing, right? But there's a framework as well as my rights end where yours begin, and my rights begin where yours end. So what's that? What does that look like? Where we're living in the same building, we're next door neighbors, and you're blasting this music, and I want to sleep. But we both have the same rights. And we're friends. Like it's not like we were enemies. We were friends. Like we would drink a beer over the weekend, but it's like, oh my goodness, like this has to end, right? And it's not gonna end, right? So what does that mean when we're all together in the same ecosystem? And now nobody is against each other. Like we weren't against each other, but this was something really annoying. Hey, there's my boo. My boo just got here. Systems change, right? So that's one of the things, like how do you engage with people as human beings, right? Without like I didn't complain to another neighbor or his mother or that. It was like having a conversation. And his response is like, I'm tired. This is the only thing I can do. I want to listen to music. Headphones are not a thing. Who in Latin America wears headphones?
It's not even a thing
And it's
here.
like it's not a thing. And his thing was like, "Te jodas?" Like his thing is like, can you not listen to me? Like you listen to music during the day. Can you like find something else to complain about, champion? And I basically had to like accept that his joy was his music at night because he was working like he was home at night late. And that was his only thing. And his rights began where mine ended. And
But
that was like a real thing, right? Systems change, like thinking up here, like I'm not the center of the universe. Yes, my sleep is important. That was true. That was very that was very true. But his recreation was also important. Not more important than my sleep, not less important than my sleep. We just had to negotiate it, right? So I was like at 2 o'clock in the morning, I just really need to like get some at least an hour of REM sleep. And when I said that, he was like laughing. And he cooled it down because we made other negotiations, right? Um, but did he stop his music? No. Was I amicable about it? Yes. Did we have a conversation? Yes. Were we amicable about it? Absolutely.
did you get some rest?
Um, did I get the deep sleep I wanted? Not really, but was I annoyed by it as I was before? No, because I understood that he had rights. But when you go into it without having a conversation, and it's this like, ah, those people and they're annoying and their music and the thing, without having this like, well, let's think about this in regards to like, where do I begin and end? Where is the overlap? What can be my compromise before the island? No. What could be the what's the conversation? What's a conversation before we engage in something else? I think then we can like take a step back and be like, you know what, that's not even a big deal. But I think people jump into things ahead of time a lot of times without that reflection. And I feel like at this stage in my life, I'm good at that reflection. And I'm also good at, as I said before, at putting things together, because maybe at this day and age, I would give him a really nice set of headphones. And he'd be like, "Ooh, these are
Mhm.
dope, right?" That could be something. That's an option. Now, that wouldn't have worked in the 90s.
Context, which wow, so that was rich. And that was, I don't know, I feel like you provided me for sure with a case study on like um on so many practices, right? That I think would and do support any type of work that has to do with people, any type of work that has to do with people shifting, transforming behavior, policy, etc. Right. And so I heard a few things, um, or some of those practices or some of those frameworks, right? Like the abolitionist framework of like, we don't even do that here. What? Like, nah, like there's no, I'm not gonna like kick him out. I'm not gonna, like have a landlord throw him in jail. I'm not gonna call the cops. We're a community. We can figure this out, right?
Exactly.
And I think that there's something important there, right, about the way that we practice our work. And that's how I'm kind of like making that connection, right? And work, how does that become alive, right? Am I just, just gonna report them? Well, yes, the answer is yes, I'm gonna report them to HR, but it wasn't like an HR type of can we
Exactly.
talk about this as colleagues, right? Can we talk about this across organizations? Does it have to be a competition, right? Does it have to be it's either you or me? Um, you also the framework, I'm naming it like the figure it out framework, right? Which I would say it was definitely alive in my household, right? It's like, look, this is your brother, this is your sister,
Hmm.
figure it out, right? This is your neighborhood. Kind of like, and what I mean by that is like this is the reality of the situation, right? And when they told you, well, look, this is where your rights begin, his end, where his end, yours begin.
Uh-huh.
And so there's something about like you being able to negotiate that yourself, right?
Correct.
That like was present in that, right? It was like, look, I'm not gonna tell you the whole thing. I'm just gonna give you some context. This is the context. Try to figure it out. Um, I mean, and in there, I heard, kind of like frameworks around of transformative justice, of uh, um, community and collective work, right? And y'all negotiating like, look, at 2, I just need my 2 hours. Can you figure something out? And he's like, look, I need my music. That's the only way I kind of like
Hmm.
decompress after a long day of work. And then so much, right? Not being the center of the universe, right? Which I would say if folks are familiar with the standpoint theory, right, which is like looking at things from like a different perspective, right? Like not always being the dominant center and being like, well, what do I like? What would I do? But really like, oh, what could be happening, right? Or what could be the reality of my neighbor? Um, and then ultimately the one that keeps on coming up for sure in my life is this competence around context, right? Which you also in previous conversations, like share about how you do that with your children, um, how you do that in work, right? Like understanding context, right? You shared about like, look, in the 90s, this is the context, right? Here, this is the context, and that shifts some things.
Correct.
So given that, right, I want to shift the context, right? Given the work, right, as a strategist, as an organizer, as a professora, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, where do you see meaningful systems change um happening that holds a context of power, that holds a context of justice, as we're also thinking of shift and transformation?
Mm. Okay. Uh, I think I think the relationship to I think the relationship to power is changing and the access to it, right? I think communities that um I think communities that have felt disenfranchised historically are now feeling a I'm not going to say that are feeling that they're more powerful, right? But I am going to say communities that have historically been disenfranchised now have um and this is again context, right? Now have a a, a bit more leverage. But that also depends on context, right? Is not the same for somebody that is um, that has been fighting for 15 than is earning a full-time salary over $65,000, right? Those are two different realities that people are facing. Um, but but the ability to access things, I feel, has leveled up, right? And I say that because I have had conversations with people that um, have, been, for example, um, labored as domestic workers, as cashiers at fast food restaurants, et cetera, that through, right, informal access to informal knowledge and education, social media streams, et cetera, are now earning a salary that they only thought was imaginable. Imaginar, de que
Mm-hmm.
no se lo imaginaban, ¿no?
Mm-hmm. Imaginable, yeah.
Unimaginable. Um, so and I'm not quantifying that only as money, but I'm quantifying that as a lot of the women that I have spoken in those positions, they're also opening up um, the realm of possibilities for a lot of other women by sharing their knowledge free of charge because I'm learning from them, right? So they're also changing the game, not only for women that come from their shared experience, but they're also sharing it from women that have benefited from a lot of different privileges, access to education, um, you know, housing, and all these other things that they didn't benefit from. So there's also a shared and shift of power, right? Within that has to be acknowledged, that people are that might seem minute, but it is not. It's actually a big game changer, right? And then we also see that in not only in the United States, but also what I know is the Americas. We can also see that throughout the Americas, where there's political shifts that are happening more in the political sphere of a lot of women specifically that were once disenfranchised that are now going into formal politics and being elected. So there's also this trend of accessing formal power, economic power, political power, right? And I'm speaking specifically Black and Indigenous people, right? Um, and those opportunities weren't necessarily there before. So there has been a shift that could be seen as minute, but the impact is big.
Mm, thank you. Okay, I have a few things bubbling in there, right? Systems. So this webinar, right? Power and justice as systems change, right? And so I think that we cover a lot of ground around justice when we speak about equity, when we speak about inclusion, right? When we speak about uh, amplifying the voices of folks that may not uh, um, be the what's the usual suspects, in a systems change convening collective conference, even, right? But you touched on something that I really been wanting to be in more conversation around is power, and you named specifically in what you shared economic power, social
Mhm.
power, political power, right? Um, and so I have a question. I don't know if this is like a little side or like a small question or big question. You decide. Um, Politics. What when you say politics, what do you mean, right? Um, and and our politics, our politics part of systems change, right? Like is the work of systems change also political work? I think that's the question
Mhm.
that I had to ask you.
Well, for me, and I was very clear in my words because I said, I believe I said, um, I said political power, but I mean, like formal politics,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, yep.
the right to be to elect and be elected, right? But everything is political for me. Everything, right? Um,
What do you mean by that?
that everything is political. What we consume is political. Who we relate to is political. Um, ev- Everything is political. I think,
But I don't. What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm playing. I'm playing.
eh,
I know what you mean, but I love for you to elaborate on what it is that you
correct, correct. Well, I can story tell, right? Because I'm also a storyteller. Um, I'm from Panama and I'm Jamaican descent, right? And if you don't know the history of Panama and Jamaica, it's easy to find. It's online, right? I don't need to go much into that. But I have a relationship with CMOS. I have a relationship with CMOS. I have a relationship with ice and glass, right? If you don't know what those things are, look it up or don't look too deeply. We also don't need you all up in that. Um, we really don't. My next door neighbor is also in the Bronx, right? And I grew up with these things in Panama, right? I grew up with these things in Panama. Um, look at the geography of Panama, and you'll understand how easy that is. Um, Not rocket brain, not rocket science. My next door neighbor in the Bronx is also Jamaican. Now, I want to be clear. I do not claim Jamaica like that because there's a lot of appropriation going out there. I'm saying I'm Jamaican descent. That's punto, right? Punto y aparte. Um, so I know a lot about Jamaica. Um, but my next door neighbor is Jamaican. She's actually Jamaican. Um, so one of the things that we share is CMOS. And she she'll give me bags of CMOS here and there, right? Or she used to give me bags of CMOS here and there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Suddenly, she tells me that the person that gives her CMOS can't get CMOS no more. ¿Qué pasó? What is going on? She tells me, you know, all these white people are using CMOS. And I'm like, so now we have to suffer CMOS loss. Everything is political. That's what I mean, right? So she's like, Whole Foods is selling CMOS. Etsy, have you been on Etsy? All these people are selling CMOS. She's all upset about all this booming businesses of CMOS, including a lot of Black folks that never knew about CMOS are selling CMOS. My people from Latin America that have nothing to do with CMOS, that never knew about CMOS, are suddenly all consuming CMOS. Am I mad at that? No, but there is no historical or cultural, religious, nothing linking anything back to Jamaica or the rituals around CMOS. So that people that have grown up consuming CMOS now can no longer get CMOS or buy CMOS. Everything is political. So when people are buying CMOS without any kind of consciousness, because now it's a superfood that has now been commercialized, everything is political, right? So the political piece for the people of Jamaica, and I have taken a step back from consuming CMOS because I'm not Jamaican. I'm Jamaican descent, right? And I am not going to be buying CMOS on Etsy. I'm not going to buy CMOS in Whole Foods, right? And CMOS is now skyrocketed. She can't even get CMOS anymore. And she tells me, she's like, you know, everything is political. And the same goes with coconut oil. The same goes with platanitos, which were before 49 cents and 69 cents, 89 cents, 99 cents. Now it's like $1.99, $2.99, $4.99 at Whole Foods. They just, there is a brand that won the best vegan snack. And it was white people that won it. How many people buy in the United States platanitos? It's not called platanitos anymore. It's called something golden chips at the vegan store now. And they buy it, they pay it, but you would never pay that at the bodega where they're being sold. Why? Because everything is political. So some people would rather go and buy, and then have the audacity or caucasity to come and tell me about the benefits of plantain chips. That's what I mean. Everything is political.
Yeah. I mean, and first, I love platanitos.
No, golden chips.
golden banana chips, probably.
Algo así, with black garlic.
And I'm sure that folks have encountered this concept one way or another, right? Either I mean, so many folks have named, like everything being political, right? And when we say political, we're not saying red and blue, we're not saying democratic.
Exactly.
We're talking about the examination of where power exists in that dynamic, in that exchange, right? Like who loses, right? Who wins, who gains, who benefits from this decision, or this indecision, right? Because it goes either way, right? I'm sure you've stumbled across the quote, and I'm gonna chop it up. So please, in the footnotes, add the correct one about like, even the choice to be apolitical is a political choice, right? And that it's an endorsement of the status quo, it's an endorsement of the unexamined life. right? Um, oh, I was frozen. See, that's political too, right? And so clearly I do know and feel that the way that we even look at systems, right, has a context of a political context to it, right? And when we don't look at it that way, then what's at stake for that is that we continue to promote the status quo, we continue to promote harm, we continue to promote death, terror, etc. Um, and so I want to bring it back, right, to everything being I'm sorry, political, right? In that the work that you've been doing, right, the work that you've seen done, um, is not just happening in one political context, right? You gave us a layout of what's happening in Latin America also, right? And you're calling us from Panama. And
Mm-hmm.
so what does it like what are there differences that you're seeing, right, around how folks approach change in a systemic way, it like as you shift context, right? Like when you're up like north up here in the Bronx, right? And kind of like doing work there. And when you're in Panama, kind of doing systemic work there, how do you see what are the shifts or the changes or the commonalities or the patterns that you see um, in regards to how folks think about how change should happen?
Mm. You know, yes and no. Um, I'll say that for me, yes, there's this like US, right? And then there's the Bronx, right? Um, and I see a lot of similarities between the Bronx and Latin America, right? And so I'll divide those. I divide, and I keep when I'm in Latin America, I say that I'm actually from the Republic of the Bronx, right? And people, I usually have to explain what that means, in regards to like who who I identify the people of the Bronx are, and a little bit of about the history, right? Because when I say New York, there's this like focus on this tiny area of Manhattan, right? And that's what people like zoom into. So I have to say like the Republic of the Bronx and everything that that means. Um, but I see a lot of similarities. Like today, for example, um, the a group of women got together to I didn't read the chat,
I
sorry.
got you. Keep going. After this, we're gonna
Oh,
go
okay.
into like Q&A, but please keep going.
Got it. A group of women got together to support a school that is marching with climate justice signs at a march tomorrow, right? And they all came together to support this this high school that tomorrow everybody comes out marching in their uniforms and everything else. So that would happen. That to me would happen in the Bronx. I don't know if it necessarily would happen in New York, right? And the fact that they all came together because they needed hundreds of signs made like this because the students wanted it, and it was like a last minute kind of thought, but it's the kids, and it wasn't parents, it was a women's group that does work around violence against women, but they understand the link between climate justice and violence against women. So they mobilize to get women together to do these signs. Boom. So people had to take, you know, cardboards and all. That's the kind of stuff that builds communities and would happen in the Bronx. Also, there was tarot reading happening at the same time. There were all these different conversations, right? But within that, there's also like women and the students checking in on each other, talking politics, talking about eyeglasses and dental visits and what was going to be happening, and and I really identify with that because Omar, my partner, who is actually on the call now, he'll be like, I'm making lunch to share at Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice, and he'll be cooking because he's gonna have a meeting there, and I'll be like, but don't take all the food, and he's taking all the food, right? Those are things that happen when you're in community and relationship with your people. But that doesn't necessarily happen in spaces where you don't have relationship or even similarities, and you haven't like been part of, but you are of, but you're supposed to be of, right? And it's just business, business, business. And I'd rather be in community. But that's where the change comes, when you're in community. But you also, the key there too is that you have to live in the community. So that's also like a key piece of what I see in Latin America, is that people are building to change communities because they're also in the communities, they're living in the communities. People are not going an hour and a half away from where they live to be in community with other people. People are going like 10 minutes away and helping and then coming back and advocating. So they're also feeling the impacts of their work right there and then, and right there and then. But that's also the benefits of, Panama is, a friend of mine said that Panama is a sample of a country. And I get that. Right. And I really like that analogy. It's a sample of a country. So everything is tiny. And the Republic of the Bronx is also a sample of New York. It's tiny, even though it's big at the same time. But we feel the effects big because it's so tiny.
Mm. Um, thank you for that. And now I can also say that I'm a member of the Republic of the Bronx. Hopefully, or do I have to like file for that?
I'm not, the thing is, and here's a complicated piece, right?
Okay.
Um, when I'm outside of the Bronx, because I'm not born and raised in the Bronx, right? I cannot, when I'm outside of the Bronx, I'm all about the Bronx, right? And I claim the Bronx, like I live in the Bronx, da, 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 da. But when I'm in the Bronx, I have to be very careful because I'm not born and raised in the Bronx. Even though I gave birth in the Bronx and my children can run all over me, they're much younger than me, and they can be BX every day. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, because I have to respect where I am. And I feel like there's a lot of disrespect around land and where people, and will I ever be claimed by the Bronx? I don't know. And that's regardless. I'm still gonna fight for the Bronx. I'm still, but I'm not gonna appropriate the Bronx because I'm not born and raised in the Bronx. I don't know if there's like a time that, but that's not me. But I see people that are like, I'm from Harlem. And it's like, oh, how long have you been in Harlem? Like a year. Like, please get out of here. Like, get out of here. Right? Somebody told me recently that they lived in Panama. And I said, oh, how long did you live in Panama? And she said 3 months. And I was like,
You're like, we don't do that. We don't do that over here. We don't do that.
this is how people navigate life and get opportunities and appropriate and steal. We don't do that here. We do not do this here. So yes, I I live in the Republic of the Bronx, absolutely. But, I can't claim that I'm like the Bronx. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. That the same way that I'm Jamaican descent, but I'm not Jamaican, it's the same thing.
I have so many other curiosities around that, But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create some space for other folks to ask some questions, right? But I'll give you a hint around a question that I'm gonna have, depending on how much time we have toward the end, is about actually kind of like the reverse of what you're saying, like actually claiming an identity. And I would say, in particular to the conversation about systems change, right? And that like who gets to claim that they are a systems change leader or not, right? Or who gets identified as such and who does not. But again, that's just a hint. I'm not gonna ask that question yet. The first question is I want to bring Lisa's question right back up. And Lisa's question was around your sharing around CMOS and platanitos and that. She hears a connection to appropriation and commercialization in the stories of CMOS. Can you help Lisa see how politics connects in it?
Oh, absolutely. Because if we are void of knowing histories and people and struggles, then and where we purchase things and how we purchase them, then what are we doing about people and their history, right? CMOS is also like a religious thing, right? It's a product um, that is not there of service to other people. So now that it has been discovered as a superfood, now it is there to be of service to people. The same as quinoa. Quinoa, people from um, Ecuador and Bolivia that are actually from there can barely purchase it because it's so expensive. But up in United States, they're making pastas with it. They're making a whole bunch of. The industry has changed it. So exportations from these countries, right, have increased so much that the local economy can no longer sustain it over there. So that's political. And who is it impacting? Indigenous people. The land is being depleted to sustain the economy over here. That's political. And if we're just like, oh, you know what? I can't have what are the diet like
Gluten free?
paleo, gluten-free, keto, and I have to eat quinoa pasta because I can't have any wheat. Hello, that's political. Absolutely. Absolutely. The fact that my next door neighbor has grown up in the United States and she can't get CMOS just like that is political because that's part of her rituals and traditions. Political. And there's another question there. It's amazing to see the comparison between the right to sleep or listen to music and the right to purchase the CMOS example again from the local vendor versus high-end stores and the internet. Do the decision makers consider local and national access when making it commercialized? I have no idea. I think the decision makers just saw an opportunity. I have no idea. Um,
It wasn't a question. I was just
oh,
thought it was
okay.
amazing. You didn't plan that comparison, but in your conversation, it it came to me how you talked about that you considered where my rights end and theirs begin, and you didn't feel like, okay, I had the right to infringe on that, and you stood back. But when the decision makers had the opportunity to do that, um, they didn't take it. They just consider, let's make this open access, and then consider who would lose and who would win. And
Mm-hmm.
that only emphasizing what the point you had made even before you made it. That's all.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Alternate, am I saying that cool? Okay. Um, Opening the space here for other folks that like to open up their mic, ask some more questions here. Um, we're ready. I know Janvieve is. What's resonating for folks? Or even what questions are you asking? Are you being called to ask or to think about right now? Please share. in the chat out loud. Love to hear your voice. Janvieve, you see in the chat about some yearning to hear about your work through Afro resistance.
Absolutely. So Afro resistance, it's a, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a human rights and racial justice and democracy organization. We it's a regional organization as well. We work you see that one of the latest things that we've done, we help to make sure that one of the most recent things that we've done, I'm like, how do I not toot my horn like that? But I'm gonna toot it.
Toot it.
We we took the largest delegation in history of Black women and femmes and other women of color to Colombia to make sure that that democracy was respected, and we ensured that the first Black vice president of Colombia was elected. Hello.
I was looking for like a horn sound, but then I forgot. Like this is not.
I know.
I can't do it here.
So, and that's like a huge deal. Such a huge deal that yesterday for Halloween, which is not really observed like that in Latin America, Black girls dressed up as Francia Marquez, which is like a big deal. And that brings tears to my eyes because it reinforces again change, right? That when
Systemic change.
that when children have role models to aspire to that look like them, they will fly high, they will strive, and that's evident already, where you have boys and girls now role playing in Spanish, which is really important because that has never really happened before, where they're role playing in Spanish when they are presidents, where they're vice presidents, which is a big deal for us. That's one of the things that we do. We have a, yes, the United States is the largest incarceration field in the world. Latin America is the largest growing prison complex for Black women right now, and it's growing, right? So the sad part is that the numbers are sketchy because what most of Latin America doesn't want to do is quantify how many Black people there are in their countries, but we know that the largest concentration of Black people outside of Africa is indeed in Latin America. So it makes us the largest amount of people in the world, right, outside of Africa. So one of the things that we're doing right now, we just launched a previously incarcerated network of women, Black women. So we're trying to get different cities and cities within countries. We're starting with Colombia right now to quantify how many Black women are incarcerated, starting with their previously incarcerated community, which is like a big Brazil is the only country that has it desegregated by race, right? And we know the hardships that women specifically face while incarcerated, and once they leave the prison system in Latin America. Not only does society criminalize women that have left the prison system, but the church does too. So, and the church is harder than society. So we're also we're also like having to deal with like that punitive spiritual factor. So, women just can't get employment because God has punished them and they're sinners, right? And that's like a real thing because of how the church colonized Latin America. Um, so that's one of the things that we're doing. And then the other side is that we highlight joy, right? So we highlight like accomplishments that women are doing, accomplishments that young girls are doing. We celebrated the Day of the Girl. I'm here also in Panama to give out prizes to winners. We're always looking for donations as well, because women that are leading organizations are the least funded ones, so that's also a real thing. So working with donors and funders and philanthropy is like a big deal, and we're also trying to change how philanthropy is done throughout the region, so that sorry so that local small grassroots organizations in Latin America can also access funding to do the work that they're supposed to be doing. um, and I have fun doing it. I really enjoy my work. It's a work of love. Um, yeah, that's what we do.
Gonna give a few beats to see if anyone else wants to come in, have a
Oh,
question
the baby does.
before I throw one in there. Yeah, the baby. The baby wants to know how, like, she wants to know what keeps you going and what are your resilience practices in this work of change that you do.
What keeps, as I said, I have fun doing what I do. So let's keep that at the top. My kids keep me going as well. My kids are hilarious. My they're both I feel like they're both comedians. And maybe I'm a comedian too. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm pretty sure I am a comedian. Um, but both my kids are comedians. We have a lot of fun. I'm always up for a good time. I'm also part of a collective called Radio Caña Negra. And Radio Caña Negra, we have a podcast, and it's with two other homegirls of mine, and we just tear up.
Shout
So
out to Evelyn.
that's with Evelyn, and Dash. And if you have high expectations of political correctness, just don't listen to us. That's a disclaimer. So you hear me nice and cool and everything. There's a lot of F bombs being dropped. There's a lot of like save yourself. Don't listen to it because you'll be like, did she really say that? Yes, we did. Yes, I did. I'm very unapologetic. It could get raunchy sometimes. We don't go, oh, and you put it there. Okay. Um, you know, that's part of my self-care. I don't have to be always politically correct, right? But that's like a personal non-judgment space where we said what we said and we said it. Yeah, like that's it, right? Um, I also I have a lot of fun with my partner, with my husband. He's also in the movement. He's also amazing, and we have good belly laughs. Sometimes at each other's expense, but that's just what we do. Um, I meditate a lot, so I do take that very seriously. Every morning I meditate. I try and meditate in the evenings as well. Um, my kids pretend to meditate. They sit there and I look at them and they're like, um, but we're gonna get better with them. But yes, so my husband and I, we meditate together every morning. I also work out religiously, uh, because I have to. If I don't, I'm a hot mess. Literally a hot mess. Lately, I've been wearing lipstick. It makes me feel better. Uh, What else do I? Oh, I hang out with my homegirls. Whenever I can ditch, is my husband still on? Anyways, whenever I can ditch the kids, I ditch the kids. So as much as I love spending time with them and they keep me moving, whenever I can ditch them, I do. And I hang out with my homegirls because they're a good time. Oh my goodness, they are a good time. So anybody here, I see Altanette with her big smile. Like I think I want to hang out with her because she has this big smile, and I'm like, see, that's the kind of energy that I'm ready to go. So I don't know where in the world you are, but I'm down for a good time. And that last name, Matt Laughing, it sounds like a fun last name too. Sounds like a lot, like we're gonna laugh. And Crystal is a yes. Crystal is the other one. And systems change. Kids Passport to Adventures. Crystal keeps them moving. I have a North Carolina. Yes, I'm down. I
I was
think
gonna
I'm
say,
actually there
Antonella
in May.
looked like she got enough space for a party too back there.
I think I'm there in May.
Okay.
I think I'm there in May. But yes, I hang out with my homegirls. Crystal makes a slamming mango drink. If you all want that, like she got you basil and mango.
Well, based on you figuring out like sending your daughter's food to La Colombia, we could probably figure out sending those drinks across the addresses here.
Oh,
Janvieve,
Crystal is in New York.
okay, so I'm close. Um, I okay, let me see chat. No more. See, you should have asked questions, but I got more questions. I also want to honor. We're almost done. We're almost
Yes.
done. I'm sad about that. Before we're almost done, I do want to continue to let people know um about what we're doing here, right? And so this webinar series is a continuation and an invitation to conversations and inquiries alive in the Illuminate network, right? And so this is not just happening here, right? Like you already know that Janvieve is like in two places at least, right? And that's not even like Bronx and Panama. I'm just talking about Clubhouse and Zoom, right? On top of all the other places. Um, and these are conversations that continue to evolve and respond to your engagement, right? To your feedback, to calls from colleagues, partners, participants, in these sessions and through our mighty network that we have online, right? And so this conversation and this format evolves, right? Um, so wanted to put that reminder out. And so I do have, I think there's one question, but I might be lying. So I just want to disclaim that, right? Um, how can we support your work and what you're up to?
Yes. So there's a few things. One is um Afro Resistance, right? You can always donate. I'll put it here. It's afroresistance.org. Donate. That's one. We really need donations. We're actually launching a 24 and 24, which means we need 24 people to donate $24 um, recurring donor for 24 months. So 24 people, $24, 24 months. That's not hard. We need it, right? So if we get more than that, hey, yay. And that's because we have a Black women, girls and femmes fund, and that fund resolves the problems of so many people in the Black women and girl and femmes issues in the Americas. So North, Central, South, and Latin America, and the Caribbean. Sorry, not Latin America, and the Caribbean. And I mean like paying light bills, getting data for their phones, like so many things that you just would take for granted living in the United States. But also, if you are an undocumented Black woman from Latin America living in the United States, you would not imagine the limitations that there are, right? because a lot of immigrant organizations do not service Black people. That's just a reality of it. And I'm not making these stories up. There's just not a lot of services for people that look like me in the United States. So we launched this mutual aid fund when the pandemic started, and it depletes like so quickly. So we just need it to be we I don't know if refurbish is the word, pero necesitamos que se llene de
Replenished.
nuevo, replenished.
Thank you.
My first language is Spanish. That's one. The other thing is, I'm an actual coach, right? I'm an actual coach. So I'm really invested in Black women, Indigenous women, and other racialized women success, right? That's an actual thing that I'm really invested in, because so many of us have been like treated like rag dolls, burnt out, and just disposed of. And that's not what we want. We don't want that for us. So I offer coaching services, and I offer group supports, and I offer a lot of resources. So also reach out to me, and let's talk about what that looks like. We speak at different events, we do different groups, we have different trainings and workshops that we offer to different organizations as well. If you email me, I can share all that stuff for you. And we also do delegations, right? Throughout Latin America. Black delegations, right? To Black communities.
Yeah.
But they have to be exchanges, right? So the point is not, we don't do political tourism. We do actual meetings with Black groups for political advocacy. So you could see firsthand the impact that our US tax dollars are impacting Black communities in a really effed up way, to be honest. So that people here can take action and actually advocate, locally at the Congress level around you all need to stop all these things, because these things are impacting Black communities specifically.
Okay, I have. You know what? I lied. I have a half a question, right?
Yeah, because we have a half of 5 minutes.
We have half. Okay. I guess my question is this in the form of a question? Like what? Okay, what questions or what question? Okay, let me erase that. Let me go back. Hold up. As folks that are engaged in, our leaders in, our members in the systems change field, right? That are systems change leaders. What's a practice or a question that we can continue to ask? And I know I asked you something sort of to that in our clubhouse, and I know the questions always evolve. But what's a question or a practice that we can continue to have to hone in, our politics around the way we change systems? In 30 seconds, go.
No, I honestly think is how are we I didn't speak about dominant culture, but I'm always questioning what is my role in dominant culture? How do I uphold it, right? So I'm gonna come back to everything is political, right? But how am I complicit in the oppression of other people? Because I definitely am, right? So that for me it's always how am I complicit in this, and how do I navigate this? And it's not making an excuse for myself, right? But it's how do I navigate this, and how am I okay with this? And how do I sit with this? Because otherwise I'm a hypocrite, right? So if I don't acknowledge it and I just ignore it, then I'm just a hypocrite, right? And that's not what I want to be. I want to be upfront with things. Quick example, I have this deep off here. I don't use off, right? Whatever, it's like a whatever, but it's here, it's in my house, in my parents' house. So what does that mean when I'm against aerosol, when I don't really buy aerosols and all that kind of stuff, and that's not good for my skin, all these different things, right? But how, so can I really go around judging other people, right, that do use these things, or not, right? Like, so those are the things, like, if we're really committed to other human beings, if we're really committed to change in our communities, we can't be like that, which I see a lot of, right? We just have to navigate, like, what are our own practices that are also upholding injustice, that are also upholding oppression, and sit with that, right? And knowing that we're not superior than anybody else just because we, you know, I have the citronella oil in my house. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And where does that position me in regards to race and class and access to information, when my parents that, that probably paid a lot of money for this off and probably can't afford it, this is here, right? Like, what does that mean? Um, So I think it's like being really clear about who we are and where we are and how we navigate our own privileges and our oppressions. And that's it. Just being clear about that.
Wow, mic drop. You know, I also heard that part of like that we are not separate from the system, right? That we are a
At
part
all.
of it, and that we get to sit with that, right? If we are to affect it. Let's go. Okay. Thank you, Janvieve. Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. Clapping here in my house, out there, I hear it. Um, wow. Okay,
And I
so
do have to jump now because my parents are waiting for me.
yes, yes. Thank you so much, Janvieve. Other folks, thank you so much. I just want to remind folks and thank folks for joining us on this platform. And we're using Illuminate's collective platforms to build connections and synergies that center systems change and justice around the world. So if you are actively contributing in this way, are interested in learning more, know more folks that need to be in this conversation, um, and want to learn more about these approaches, these perspectives related to this critical work, we hope that we'll see you in the next webinar. We hope that we'll see you, in our like newsletter, updated email list. We hope to see you on our virtual networks and our other programming. And so, thank you so much for joining us. If you came this way, that means you'll probably get updates on the next webinar series that are going to be happening really soon. And last but not least, I'd love to thank again Lang Kelly Chase Foundation for sponsoring the series. And thank you all so much for joining us on this day. Thank you so much.